Hello there, ladies and gents, and any other appropriate terms of address. Let's get straight to the point. Doctor Who has stopped being fun, at least as far as I can see. I've watched this show for a number of years, from when it was revived in 2005, and then going back to its original run from 1963 to 1989, but I think that I'm unlikely to be watching Series 11, and will almost certainly be avoiding the show for the foreseeable future. First, an introduction to my history with Doctor Who. I first watched it when I was 12, and my first Doctor was Christopher Eccleston, the ninth incarnation. Having never seen it before, but having had someone explain it to me as a show about a man who travels through time in a box and not really expecting much, I was hooked. I followed the show as Eccleston became Tennant, then Tennant became Smith, and Smith became Capaldi, and though many aspects of my life changed, Doctor Who was always a constant. Whether I was doing exams, searching for jobs, performing on stage, or just generally trying to find my place in the world, I would sit down on Saturday night and watch Doctor Who. And that was only the beginning of it for me. After I left school, I found I had a lot of time on my hands, and having vaguely heard that Doctor Who had started in the 1960s, I thought I'd try and check out the original series. I started slowly at first, buying DVDs of Genesis of the Daleks and the Five Doctors, which was the 20th anniversary special, and watching those, and then deciding that since there were 7 incarnations to catch up on, I'd watch each one's first and last story, and then one in between. And once again, I was hooked. Soon, first, last and one in between became every TV story with that Doctor, and so began the task of collecting and watching every story of the original series, covering 26 seasons and 26 years of TV history. The original series of Who is quite different from the modern. Stories are multiple episodes, everything is less flashy, and there aren't really any season-long plot lines, meaning you can dip in and out of different eras and not be completely confused by what's going on. The modern series has a tendency to complicate things, having a season-long story arc that can leave you very confused if you skip a couple of episodes. The cliche question is, who is your favourite Doctor? And I would respond with the cliche answer, all of them for different reasons. But for me, it's really a toss-up between the first 3, William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee, and of those, I think Troughton just edges in front. That may be one of the reasons that Peter Capaldi was one of my favourite incarnations, not just of the modern series, but overall, because he himself is a fan of the show and respects its origins, and seems to channel a lot of Hartnell and Troughton in his performance. I was thrilled when he was announced as number 12. But when Jodie Whittaker was first announced, I'll admit I wasn't sure about it. Prior to that, I had been generally opposed to a female Doctor for 2 main reasons. 1, the motive for the casting, which I feared would have more to do with politics and forced diversity than it would with wanting to actually explore the character, and 2, the loss of a male role model for boys. And I know you can say that boys have lots of good role models, from Luke Skywalker to Frodo Baggins, but for me, Doctor Who has always been different. Whereas many males in fiction will solve their problems by shooting things or relying on someone more heroic to step in, the Doctor is more likely to think his way to a solution, which is, unfortunately, a rarity. So, when Miss Whittaker was announced as the new Doctor Who, I was almost immediately sceptical, and I didn't feel the same excitement I had with previous incarnations. This change from male to female, the arguments about whether this is possible in the show's canon can be discussed elsewhere, seem to be symptomatic of a trend in current entertainment to make every protagonist female and to feminise known brands. We've had a female Thor, the feminised Ghostbusters, Rey, and the Force is female, and some rejoice at this and others do not. Gone, for better or worse, seem to be the days of the square-jawed, manly man who would ride in and rescue the helpless damsels in distress, and many would say that all these leading women are a good thing, inspiring young girls and telling them that they can be heroic as well, though apparently we give to girls by taking away from boys, but that's another discussion. But there seems to me to be actually a bit of a sinister undercurrent to all of this. We very often see male characters being replaced by female, but very rarely the other way round, and when female characters are brought in, it's hailed as a great thing, as if it wasn't a great thing when the character was male. One article I stumbled across after Whittaker was announced had the headline, "The Doctor has been upgraded," and this seemed to imply that the character becoming female was somehow an improvement. But surely it's a neutral thing. If we value the 2 sexes equally, then shouldn't a character's sex change make 0 difference? Or is there something more sinister going on? Is it angry feminists and their idea of equality actually meaning nothing of the sort? The BBC has a diversity and inclusion strategy for 2016 to 2020, which essentially is a document that details their targets for who is going to be represented on their broadcasts for that time period. I'll admit I didn't read the document in detail, but what did catch my eye was the specific percentages. By the year 2020, the BBC wants something like 8% of the people seen on its screens to have a disability, 15% to come from an ethnic minority, and 50% to be female. No problem there, of course. In fact, surely this is a good thing, since it will help to normalise seeing disabled people and non-white people on our screens. And here I think the most powerful argument is the role model one. If a child in a wheelchair just sees able-bodied presenters on screen, then they may regard themselves as different, which can really damage their self-esteem and chances in later life, as they're constantly reminded that they're different. But if this child sees someone like, for example, Adi Adepitan on screen, then they may notice that he also uses a wheelchair and is perfectly normal and is like them in at least one respect. It's important to have diversity, especially on the BBC, and to represent the people who watch its shows and listen to its broadcasts and so on. And so the diversity and inclusion strategy aims to achieve this. But might not this also be the reason why it was decided that Doctor Who should now be a woman? Because those in the suits were trying to meet some target? Because they were trying to tick a box? I don't know, of course, since I don't work in BBC management, but I think it's at least possible that Jodie Whittaker was cast as the Doctor, not because of any dramatic reason or any desire to develop or explore new directions for the character, but because of pressure from management. So, to those who would say this is some kind of bold, dramatic opportunity, I'm not so sure. It may be nothing more than corporation targets. The BBC knows a lot of people watch Doctor Who, and so every year it's guaranteed a lot of viewers for 12 or 13 weeks, and so this may be simply an attempt to exploit that so it can say it's met its targets. As I say, nothing wrong with that, and these days TV is very much a business, but if there's a reasonable chance of this being the case, then let's not pretend that Jodie Whittaker was cast because of some noble principle or high ideal. This next point may be entirely subjective, though as someone who is familiar with the looks and appearances of all prior canonical Doctors, I think I'm entitled to say this. When I look at Jodie Whittaker, I just don't see Doctor Who. I see the character shining through with all the other actors, and when Tennant, Smith and Capaldi were cast, I only mention these because I wasn't around when any of the others were announced, so I can't say exactly how I felt when Tom Baker or John Pertwee was revealed. I felt a certain excitement. Though I didn't know exactly how each one would do it, glancing at publicity shots and stills from other work, I could see something very doctorish about each of them, whether it was Matt Smith's floppy hair or Capaldi grasping his lapels like Hartnell. With Jodie Whittaker, all I see is a 30-something woman with nothing particularly alien or eccentric about her. I may be wrong to think this, of course, but that was my initial reaction. And I think her costume is quite simply crap. I'm no fashion designer, of course, but with the other costumes there's a coherency and a fluency to them, whether it's John Pertwee's suave, dandy look or Davison's cricket kit. Even Colin Baker's clown vomit look is coherently awful, though I can't deny it has a certain appeal. But Whittaker's just looks slung together by someone who doesn't really know what they're going for. We have trousers of an odd length, a shirt that has a couple of coloured lines on it, and a raincoat that's a drab grey. I can't see what kind of character they're trying to create here. It's neither curmudgeonly professor, nor cosmic hobo, nor dandy, nor bohemian buccaneer, and so all I see is a 30-year-old woman who I might see walking along the street in London. But as I say, that's all subjective, and others do seem to like the costume. What is less subjective, though, is the fact that the casting of Jodie Whittaker has been controversial. It seems to have split fans of the show right down the middle, with half thinking it's the best thing ever and half thinking it's the death of Doctor Who. People have been furious on both sides, with some railing against it and some railing against them, and basically a lot of people are pretty angry, whether they're at the show or at each other. And that really is my central point. What I've seen online has not been discussion or debate, it's been insult matches. People just hurling vitriol and screaming abuse at each other over the internet. Maybe that's how we debate these days. If so, then what a shame. But I've seen sexist and unprintable comments, accusations that some fans are fake, and altogether lots of anger but very little reason. If there's an issue to be debated about which you have a strong opinion, then surely the best approach is to make your points in a calm and sensible way instead of just screaming at people who don't agree with you. But I've not seen any attempt at calm and sensible behaviour from Doctor Who fans, and I fear that now represents them. These heated debates, simplistic arguing and refusal to actually sit down and behave in a civilised manner have made me question if I'm going to watch the next series. It is, after all, very unbecoming for fans of a show that's supposed to be about tolerance and open-mindedness to be screeching loudly at each other. There was a time when Doctor Who fans could behave like adults, when they could disagree on things and then get on with their day without ruining someone else's, but I fear that that time has passed. I fear that Whovians are no longer capable of reasonable discussion. The show is supposed to be, to quote Craig Ferguson, about the triumph of intellect and romance over brute force and cynicism, but it seems that despite watching the show fanatically, many people appear to have learned nothing from it. Now, it would be ignorant of me to claim that this is new to the Doctor Who fandom. We've had screeching Tumblr posts for many years now, casual dismissal of the original series as sexist and old-fashioned despite its many great qualities, and I'm sure there were unpleasant fans before the days of the internet who vented their anger and hostility through other means. It's common in many fandoms, as many who have ever engaged with fans of anything will know. I've not really ever enjoyed engaging with Whovians, but even in my most cynical moments I could acknowledge that even those people I didn't like had something in common with me, that they enjoyed Doctor Who. We may have disagreed on some of the finer points, but we all took the core messages of Who to heart and celebrated it for its optimism, its weirdness, and its ability to regularly create half-decent adventures in 45 minutes. In the past, My love for the show was greater than my dislike of the fans, and that was enough to keep me going. However awful fans could get, at the end of the day, the show was where it counted. But I'm afraid to say that now, since Whittaker was revealed, my love is no longer stronger.